everyone. A little bit off. Hello. Goodness, my hair's so flat. But we are here once again to read, and Bob is trying to get comfortable. Hello, Bob. Can you come say hi? Say hello. Mwah. Yeah, you want to sit in lap? Go ahead. We are continuing Heaven Official's Blessing today, chapters 66 to 68. Let's see if I can put the camera down a little bit. See if we can... No, we're not going to be able to see Bob. Oh, well. He has to sit in my lap all the time. Oh, have to know where I found the music. It's all free music for YouTube. YouTube has a thing where you can, like, search for music that's free to use. I don't remember any of the titles, unfortunately. Let's see what's playing. Thin Places by Jesse Gallagher. Most of it's free to listen to on YouTube somewhere. Anyway, hello, Jeff and Adrian, Julie, Liz. Sorry you're going to miss it, but thanks for joining us. Delvin, Nafi, Natasha, Lobsol, hello. Let's see, last time we were in the beginnings of Book 2, which is the flashback to the past, learning what happened to Xie Lian and all his buddies. Last time his cousin went frickin' off the rails, drove his carriage through town, tried to murder a child, just did all kinds of wild stuff, horrible stuff, and they managed to save the kid and kind of punish the guy. Not really, he kind of got away with it a little bit. There was some drama there. One of the characters, some tension between the fact that one of the characters is, a noble, the prince that causes trouble, and then one of them is not, and had punished him for causing trouble, the guard, what's his name? Let me pull this back up. He got in trouble for, Feng Xin got in trouble for, telling off basically the prince. Some issues here. So last time when we stopped, we were at the part where they were speaking to the young child that had been abused, asking him, do you have anywhere to go? Let's take you home. And the kid says he doesn't. But Mu Qing, one of the other companions, says he's lying. He does have a place to go home. Oh, is my wrist okay? Yeah, it's okay. I just have, like most people that do all of the things with their hands, I have days where it gets painful / difficult to use, and wearing a brace makes it easier. I draw, I write, I play video games, I type, I destroy my limbs. I've been teaching myself to use my left hand with the mouse, so that's helped quite a bit, but... and hello, I believe your name is in Japanese. Let's see if I can... I'm learning, Su? No. It looks different. I have a billboard with all of the hiragana on it. Maybe it's Risu? Is your name Risu? I'm going to be so proud if I got that right. But thank you for joining us, and if I didn't get it right, I'm sorry. So, we are going to jump right into Chapter 66. To ascend is human. To fall is also human. Xie Lian turned his head and asked, "What do you mean?" "The homeless street urchins of the royal capital all run together in a gang, and they'd come to my neighborhood often to beg for food. I know all of them, but I've never seen this child before." The young child stared at Mu Qing and didn't say a word. Feng Xin was incredulous. "Who do they beg for food from? You? And you give it to them?" Mu Qing glared at him. "If they pester relentlessly, there's no other way." Feng Xin still thought the notion rather unbelievable, but didn't make any further commentary. Oh, it's in... See, I've not learned that system yet. I'm very bad at symbol languages because my brain is... I have processing disorders, and I don't do symbols well. It's why I failed math, and I literally cannot read sheet music. So I have to translate it, and that's why I have it written on a board to translate it for me. But there's too many letters to do it to all of them. I'll just be glad that I accidentally got one of the letters right. But thanks for joining us, Rico. I hope I said that right. One day, maybe I'll be better at symbols. Maybe. Xie Lian wanted to laugh watching them talk. Mu Qing continued. Besides, there's sewn patches on his clothes. Judging by the needlework, it must have been done by a grown-up only just recently, so there's at least someone of age in his house. His family situation might not be the best, but he's definitely not a beggar. Naturally, Xie Lian would not notice the details of needlework on sewn patches, nor if it was done by adults. But Mu Qing used to be an errand boy at the Royal Holy Pavilion and did all kinds of chores at home, so when Xie Lian looked closely, it was indeed as he had said. So he asked, "Do you have grown-ups at home?" The young child shook his head, but Mu Qing said, "There must be. If he doesn't go back, his family must be worried sick looking for him by now." "No! No way! There's nobody!" the young child cried, sounding like he was afraid to be sent back, and he opened his arms, reaching for Xie Lian. He was still covered with mud and blood, and Feng Xin couldn't stand it anymore. "Kid, what the hell are you doing? Things were urgent earlier, so whatever, but shouldn't you be better by now? This is the Crown Prince! The Crown Prince, you understand?" God, these people. Even Mu Qing, who's the most down-to-earth character because he grew up poor, even him being ridiculous about this child. He was just beaten and thrown in a bag and dragged behind a car, basically. And he clearly is so afraid to go home because his home life is bad, and they're like, "Get over it, kid. You're fine." God, poor child. The young child's arms immediately shrank back, but he was still gazing at Xie Lian. "There's fighting at home, and I got kicked out. I walked for a long time, but I've nowhere to go." The other three looked at each other. After a moment, Feng Xin said, "So what now?" One of the imperial doctors suggested, "If His Highness is troubled, he can be placed here in the palace and have a few attendants take care of him." Xie Lian hummed, but after some thought shook his head slowly. At the end of the day, he was afraid Qi Rong wouldn't drop the whole thing and would sneak out to cause trouble. "The way I see it, it's still best if I watch over him until his wounds are healed. It seems his family won't be able to look after him, unfortunately. Feng Xin, when you go take care of the affected stalls toppled by Qi Rong, see if you can find out where his parents are and let them know so they don't worry." "All right." Feng Xin nodded. One of his arms was still in a sling, but he extended the good arm to reach for the young child, intending to pick him up by the collar. Xie Lian laughed. "You're wounded. Don't worry about it." Mu Qing is rude sometimes. He definitely has a rougher edge, I think, because he's had to survive. But at the same time, like Feng Xin was laughing at the idea of him giving charity to kids, he does have a gentler side. He's just, I think, bitter, maybe. Maybe not bitter exactly, but he can't bring himself to trust, I think. I like his character. He develops very well through the books. However, Feng Xin shrugged it off. "Only one arm's broken, the other's fine. If both were broken, I could still use my teeth to carry him by the collar and bring him up the mountain for you." Mu Qing rolled his eyes behind him and then spoke up. "Never mind. Let me carry him." But just as he made one step forward, the young child jumped off the bed himself and said, "I can walk on my own." An expression filled with rejection spoke louder than words, and it made Mu Qing's second step extremely awkward, unsure of whether or not to proceed. The little kid had 5 broken ribs and a broken leg, but he was still as lively as a dragon. Xie Lian didn't really know whether to laugh or feel concerned. He said, "Stop running around." Then he bent down and picked him up. The 3 of them, with a child in tow, left the palace. Since Qi Rong caused havoc on the streets earlier and disturbed the townspeople, toppling a number of stalls, Xie Lian felt deeply guilty, having no face to meet any of the citizens. Face referring here to, honor, what were the other words it said? Basically, it's your how your embarrassment. Oh, I don't have any face. I can't even face these guys. I'm so embarrassed because of what's happened. It has to do with, how you're seen, how you're perceived. Let's see here. The group snuck around, afraid to show their faces, using only the back alleyways. Through the entire way, the small child was extremely docile in Xie Lian's arms. They told him to be quiet, and he uttered not a single sound. And you notice he refused to be picked up by anyone but Xie Lian. He has his favorite. Feng Xin glared. "This brat kicked me yesterday, but look at him now. He really knows how to pick 'em." It's His Highness the Crown Prince. Of course he's more well-liked than most people, Mu Qing said. For some reason, even if he'd said something well-meaning, the words he used still made people feel uncomfortable. Feng Xin refused to acknowledge what he said. After walking for a while, Feng Xin spoke up. No, I still feel Your Highness shouldn't let anyone see you holding a strange child. What's the problem? Xie Lian asked. You're the Crown Prince, Feng Xin explained. While he spoke, he saw a worn-down handcart further up the alley and said, Put the kid in the cart and pull it to go. Mu Qing immediately voiced, Just so we're clear, I will not pull that thing up the mountain. No one's asking you to, Feng Xin said. He reached out and pulled the child from Xie Lian's arms, and the child started struggling again. Never mind, forget it. Maybe someone else needs that cart, Xie Lian said. Just then, from somewhere nearby, someone suddenly called out, Are you the Crown Prince? Another immediately shouted, Yes! Yes, yes! That's the Crown Prince! His mask fell yesterday, and I saw his face with my own eyes! That's him! Catch him! The three of them froze. Their hearts dropped. Although Xie Lian didn't think he did anything wrong in the heavenly procession yesterday, he also knew that the others might not believe the same. To cut short, the god-pleasing martial ceremony was an ominous sign of misfortune. It was unspeakable amongst the nobility, and when all the excitement wore off after the fact, when the people started wondering what it all meant, they probably wouldn't be forgiving either. Adding on the havoc on the street caused by Qi Rong, the complaints must be endless. If he were to be surrounded now, it might end badly. Without thinking any deeper, Mu Qing grabbed him and shouted, Your Highness, run! Feng Xin was pulling the cart and urged, too. Your Highness, I have a broken arm. I won't be able to stop anyone rioting. Run! I have a broken run. Jeez. I can't even read today. However, outside the alleyway, there was already a mass of people who were pouring in, their faces filled with excitement, blocking all viable exits. The four of them had nowhere to run, and watched wide-eyed as they became encircled. Xie Lian thought boldly, If anything, I'll just let them beat us down without fighting back. However, unexpectedly, although the crowd poured in, they didn't pulverize them. Instead, a number of hands reached out and threw him into the air, cheering, Your Highness! Xie Lian was thrown into the air countless times, but still maintained a calm and steady disposition. The people shouted, Your Highness! That leap on the Martial Deity Avenue yesterday was spectacular! Someone exclaimed, That was such an amazing jump! Really, I totally thought the Emperor himself had descended! I had goosebumps! Another validated, His Highness was right to save the kid. A life is a life. Did they think kids from us poor people aren't the same? If it were me, I'd do it too. Another raged, That's right! Today there was talk of how His Highness had ruined the event, and I couldn't stand it. If it had been a royal or a noble who'd fallen, they wouldn't say the same. Your Highness, don't mind those people. Your Highness is the only one who truly cares about us. Xie Lian went from feeling guilty at the beginning, then disoriented halfway through, until finally he was affected by the passionate and cheerful faces all around. The crowd clustered around Xie Lian, and when they emerged onto the main street, more and more joined them. Feng Xin, Mu Qing, and the young child were pushed away and separated a way back, without any means of pushing through, and could only follow along behind the parade. The large assembly of people was surprisingly not smaller than the crowd from the day before. Every time Xie Lian made a move to leave, he would be forcibly dragged back in and thrown into the air without any chance of being let down. Xie Lian couldn't help but find it both funny and reassuring as he thought to himself, The people in Guoshi have completely opposite sentiments. It looks like I was right. When at last they reached Mount Taisong, the setting sun was ablaze brightly and vividly. Passing through the large mountain gates on the long, winding stone path, there were a number of trainees and cultivators carrying water buckets and firewood going up and down the road, greeting Xie Lian and company, but many watched the four plus a cart with wonder. Feng Xin was pulling the handcart with one hand like a hard-working, serious young black bull. Xie Lian and Mu Qing smiled back dutifully at first, but after a while they stopped caring. The maple trees were endless, and the wheels turned calmly. As they hiked, Xie Lian helped push the handcart from behind. He was feeling good and asked the young child another question casually. Little kid, what is your name really? Hong what? The young child watched him and said in a small voice, I don't have a name. Xie Lian was taken aback. Your mother didn't give you a name? The young child shook his head. My mother passed. Xie Lian felt sad for him. Then what did your mother used to call you? The young child was hesitant for a minute, then replied, Hong Hong Er. Xie Lian smiled. That's a cute nickname. I'll call you that from now on. Hong Hong Er seemed to be shy whenever they talked and lowered his head. Just then the sun was about to set, and lights were ignited from each of the pavilions all over the mountain. Aw, thank you, Palab. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Among them, the brightest was, of course, the highest peak, the Great Martial Summit. Atop the Great Martial Summit, within the hall, it was bright as day, the lights gathered like stars. Xie Lian sighed as he watched. The sigh wasn't born of sadness, but from the scenery that emanated such beauty and glory. Every bit of light within the hall was what? There's a letter missing. I don't know what the missing letter is, but basically it says, every bit of light within the hall was from an everlasting lamp. Each lamp contained the prayers and wishes of a devout worshipper. The more everlasting lamps there were within the temple of a god, the more powerful the god became. The chance to offer a lamp within the great martial hall of the Royal Holy Pavilion was difficult to buy even with 1,000 pieces of gold. Wealth, power, ability, passion, affinity, there must be one of the 5 conditions fulfilled in order to enter the hall to offer light. Yet there were none more in the world. There were more in the world that had none of the 5. Okay, that's a weird way to phrase that sentence. But anyway, Gandalf is here and trying to be in the way. Kitty cat, you're in the way. Hello. Hello. You say hi? No, don't. Ow. You're so rude. Why are you like this? The 4 of them stopped, gazing upon the great martial hall that shone like the sun, their expressions dissimilar. Just then there was a familiar voice that called out to them, Your Highness! Xie Lian turned his head and saw a fair-faced young man hurrying towards him. It looked like the trainee who guarded the entrance of Xishang Pavilion, and Xie Lian schooled his expression. Zhou Xishang, what's the hurry? Zhou Xishang noticed Mu Qing standing behind, but felt awkward and spoke, pretending not to have seen him. The Guoshi has been asking after you for a while now. He's waiting at the Great Martial Hall. Xie Lian was taken aback after hearing this, but figured it must be in regards to the incident during the heavenly ceremonial procession the day before. Very well, thank you, Xishang. Xie Lian had Feng Xin and Mu Qing take Hong Hong Er back to the Xianle Pavilion first, before heading towards the Great Martial Summit. Outside the Great Hall, clouds born from the incense vessel floated and wrapped around the Great Martial Hall, forming a dream-like state. On either side of the vessel were long rows of bright, everlasting lamps hung in the air, neatly lined into a wall of lanterns. Every everlasting lamp had on them the name and prayer of the worshipper in elegant, decorous writing. Once in the hall, on either side of the wall, were also rows upon rows of hung everlasting lamps. The lamps offered within the Great Martial Hall were, of course, even more valuable than the ones outside. In the gigantic, spacious temple, the Guoshi was offering incense before the statue of the martial heavenly emperor, and the 3 deputy Guoshi were behind him, uniformly prostrating before the great god. Xie Lian inclined his head when he entered. Guoshi. The Guoshi completed their ritual before they turned their heads back and made a gesture to him to come forward. Thus Xie Lian approached, took an incense stick, and also paid his respects in sincerity. It was a moment before Guoshi finally spoke. Your Highness, the 4 of us have deliberated. In regards to the heavenly ceremonial procession, there are but 2 ways to resolve it. Please do enlighten me, Guoshi, Xie Lian said. The first method, Guoshi said, is to find the child who disrupted the procession, and then we shall conduct a ceremony. At the very least, one of his 5 senses must be sealed as penance. Cool! Cool idea. Cool job, guys. Cool job. A footnote to this chapter, the nickname for the little kid, Hong Hong Er, air is like a cutesy nickname you put on the end of a word, of a name. I think it means two, or it means small. I don't know, but you put it on the end of a nickname. Hong Hong, being repeated means little red, basically. Well, no, I think the means little, but his nickname means little red, which is super cute, especially if you know who he is, which you may, possibly, some of you have guessed, possibly who he is. He is Little Red. Aw, sorry you don't feel well, Jeff. Hopefully it passes soon. Alright. Chapter 67. To ascend is human, to fall is also human. Part 2. Xie Lian whipped up his head. No, he repeated with severity, definitely not. Guoshi nodded. I had expected this response from you, so we've put the weight of our consideration on the second method. Please enlighten me, Xie Lian said solemnly. The second method, Guoshi said, is to have your highness publicly repent before the people of Xianle, ask the heavens for forgiveness, then face the wall in reflection for a month. Not possible, Xie Lian said calmly. Guoshi was taken aback. We're not really asking you to face the wall to reflect, you just have to look like you, ahem. He suddenly remembered they were before the statue of the heavenly martial emperor and immediately corrected himself. As long as you are sincere, it will suffice. Still, Xie Lian responded with, no. And the reason? Guoshi said. Guoshi, when I descended the mountain today, do you know what I saw? Xie Lian said. Not only did the people at the royal capital not condemn the accident that happened during the procession, they very much approved of it. This proves that the people of this kingdom all believe the decision to save the child was right. If I were to do as you say and be punished for something that was done right, what would they think? Doesn't this only tell everyone that to save a life, not only do we not obtain merits, instead we'll be punished for our sin? How should they think or act after that? Whether it's right or wrong isn't important, Guoshi said, only that you must choose between the two paths. Nothing is perfect in this world. Either the child shoulders this blame or you do. Whether right or wrong is very important. If I must choose, then I choose the third path, Xie Lian replied. Guoshi rubbed his forehead. Your Highness, excuse my boldness, but why do you care what they think? Today they think in such a way, tomorrow they'll think another. There's no need for you to mind the small details. Trust me, people will carry on doing what they need to do and will not be touched by your actions nor take you as an example. It's best if we focus on serving what's above our heads. Xie Lian was silent for a moment, then spoke. Guoshi, ever since I've entered the Royal Holy Pavilion to become a disciple here, the more I train, the more I've reflected. There's something I've always thought, but didn't dare to speak of. And what's that? Guoshi asked. Is it really right for us to worship and prostrate before the gods like this? Guoshi was speechless for a moment. If we don't worship the gods, then what are we to do? Go homeless? What, your highness thinks that the thousands and millions of devotees who come here to worship have the wrong beliefs? Xie Lian shook his head and chewed on his words. The beliefs are not wrong, only this disciple doesn't think it's right to prostrate. He raised his head and pointed to the golden, scintillating, glorious and large statue of the heavenly martial emperor. When humans ascend, they become gods. To humans, gods are elders, teachers, the everlasting light, but they are not our masters. In such regard, we should be full of thankfulness and also admiration, but never idol worship. Just like the Shangyuan heavenly ceremonial procession, the correct attitude should be of thankfulness, of joy, not of fear, not begging to please, not of intimidation, and certainly not putting myself in a position of servitude. Guoshi remained poised and silent, and the other three deputy Guoshi appeared to have become restless, turning their heads back. Xie Lian continued. An accident happened. It couldn't be helped. I am willing to offer 1,000 lamps to brighten long nights. Like moths to flames, I'm not afraid, but I refuse to bow my head for something I did right. Face the wall in reflection? What have I done wrong? What has anyone done wrong? Just like how Qi Rong committed evil, but Feng Xin, who subdued the wrongdoer, had to be punished? Where's the logic in all this? If the heavens have eyes, they would not condemn me for this. Oh, hello, Sunleaves. I'm glad you could join us. I'm definitely enjoying, this is my second time reading this, and it goes so hard on so many of these different themes, and, it's just so good. But this is all these things tying together really well. The fact that Feng Xin was punished instead of the evildoer. The fact that they want to punish the prince for saving a child. Like this, what is right and wrong? Clearly it's not what these people are doing. Guoshi looked away. Then, Your Highness, let me ask you. If the heavens really do condemn you, will you apologize then? If that should happen, then the heavens are in the wrong. I am right. I will stand against the heavens and defy until the end. Hearing this, Guoshi's face changed slightly and he smiled. Your Highness, you're pretty brave to say such words. The other 3 Deputy Guoshi watched him, wanting to speak, but stopping themselves. Just then, a sudden huge alarm went off outside the hall, like the chiming of multiple bells at once. The 4 Guoshi could no longer remain in their seats and all rushed up at the same time, running towards the back of the hall. Xie Lian followed closely behind. They traversed through the many buildings behind the great martial hall and came before a black pagoda. The doors to the black pagoda were open, and countless wisps of dark smoke were whooshing out. The Guoshi let out a despairing scream. Where's Juan? What the hell did he do? How did this happen? A number of trainee guards rushed over. The one leading them was Zhou Shishong. Guoshi, I'm here. I don't know what happened. The door was locked, but it suddenly opened on its own. Guoshi pulled his hair. Quickly, bring me a new soul-sealing jar. Xie Lian rushed straight inside. Within the black pagoda, the walls were covered in latticed sandalwood panels of various size and shapes, stacked unevenly atop each other. Within each panel were various clay jars, porcelain vases, jaded boxes, and so on. Each of these containers were originally securely placed, the red cover stoppers stuffed firmly, the openings sealed with yellow talismans inscribed with crimson spells. But now many were shattered, and many more continued to drop off the shelves themselves, those not yet fallen, all swaying and vibrating. The soul-sealing containers each had a demon or ghost who once caused havoc sealed within, and such a black pagoda existed in every single temple on Mount Taisong, purposefully utilizing the clean, saintly essence to keep them suppressed. However, something happened that caused this sudden insurgence, and they had all escaped. It's too late, Xie Lian shouted. He immediately kicked the doors closed. The steel lock that originally chained up the door had been broken by the resentful spirits, so Xie Lian unsheathed his sword, used the tip and drew out some characters, then plunged it down. He brought over 200 swords with him when he entered the mountain, and he'd switched the one carried on his person almost every day. Each was an incomparable, singular treasured sword. That sword, having been slantily stabbed into the ground, sealed the door shut, and only the sounds of resentful spirits within, rioting and roaring, could be heard. Once they left the Black Pagoda, they looked up and atop each of the summits. All the Black Pagodas behind each temple were filled with black clouds. All the resentful spirits were rushing to the sky, flying towards a certain direction that was now heavy with smoke. What's over there? Why are they all flying over there? Juan asked. Guoshi replied, Are you dumb? That's the Xianle Pavilion! The group ran like the wind, and in a blink of an eye arrived at the Xianle summit. On top of Mount Taisong, heavy, thick smoke emerged from countless temples across innumerous peaks, and rolled over to form an enormous swirl above the Xianle Pavilion. What's going on in that Xianle Pavilion of yours? All the demons and ghosts are being lured over. What exactly did you put inside? Guoshi demanded. Xie Lian was bewildered too. Nothing, just what? Xie Lian suddenly remembered. That small child. Just then, Zhou Shishong cried, Guoshi, this is bad. His Highness's place is on fire. Sure enough, a corner of the Xianle Pavilion was alight, flames bursting towards the sky, reflecting dark crimson in the black clouds above. Yet at the foot of Mount Taisong, all those in the royal capital who hadn't gone to bed had no idea what was going on when they witnessed the scene from afar, and were excitedly dragging each other to watch in awe. Wow, the great immortals on the mountain are conducting a ceremony! What a show! Soon, the group of them arrived at Xianle Pavilion. Xie Lian didn't keep too many servants, and so a number of cultivators from the other summits had rushed over, desperately drawing well water, trying to put out the fires. Xie Lian didn't see his 2 attendants and immediately rushed inside. All the resentful spirits of Mount Taisong had been gathered there. The Xianle Pavilion was completely pitch black inside. Nothing could be seen. Xie Lian sensed 2 silhouettes within the main hall and yelled, "Fengxin! Muqing!" The 2 had drawn a protection array so as to not let the evil spirits invade, holding on but just barely. Sure enough, Fengxin's voice rang out. "Your Highness, don't come in! This child is strange! All those spirits were coming for him!" Only then did Xie Lian notice that behind the 2 silhouettes was another small shadow, seemingly kneeling on the floor, his head in his hands. He screamed, "It's not me!" After observing them for a moment, Xie Lian shouted, "Stop holding on! Let it go!" Muqing cried back, "We can't let go! If we do, those things will go crazy! Let me find the most—" Xie Lian cut him off. "No fear! Let go, now!" Muqing gritted his teeth and dropped his hands with Fengxin at the same time. Sure enough, with the restraints off, the resentful spirit screeched and started going wild. However, in the next second, Xie Lian reached out lightning fast and choked a particular wisp of black smoke. He didn't even look, grabbed that black smoke with his bare hands, holding in his palm firmly. The moment he caught that one resentful spirit, all the crazed swarm of resentful spirits within the Xianle Pavilion slowed down. Outside, everyone silently nodded. In a situation where a large swarm of resentful spirits gathered in the same place, they would usually follow the lead of the strongest one. Once that one's caught, without a leader, the spirits lose direction. At that moment, Xie Lian immediately recognized the strongest one and choked it, not giving it any chance. And with only a squeeze, that one resentful spirit disintegrated into nothing in his palm. Immediately after, the 4 Guoshi raised their sleeves and called out, "Come back!" The swarm of resentful spirits, having lost its leader, flew haphazardly around the Xianle Pavilion like headless flies, until finally they had no choice but to give up and reluctantly return to the seal within the Guoshi's sleeves. The other cultivators continued to put out the remaining fires, and only until the heavy smoke had gradually dispersed did Xie Lian finally see the figures of the other 3. Fengxin and Muqing were half-kneeled on the floor, still in shock. Behind them, the child was holding his head, not uttering a word. The Guoshi entered and spoke after only a look. Where did that child come from? Fengxin said all the resentful spirits were going after him. What's going on? That's the child who fell from the city wall during the Shangyuan heavenly ceremonial procession. That is so hard to say. All the Guoshi were taken aback. Guoshi demanded, "Why did you bring him here?" Xie Lian shook his head, not wanting to explain, and instead asked Fengxin, "What did he do to attract all the spirits of the Black Pagodas?" One of Fengxin's arms was still in a sling, and he rose to his feet. "I don't know what he did. But once he entered the mountain, soon after coming inside the Xianle Pavilion, all those black things suddenly flew from all over the peaks and broke in, swarming around him, gathering more by the minute, and we couldn't get out." Xie Lian looked around at the walls and pillars burnt to a crisp inside the pavilion. "Then what's with the fire?" Muqing, whose face was covered in soot, said, "We couldn't leave, so we had to draw an array to defend. Those resentful spirits kindled the candlelight and burnt the curtains, hoping to force us out. Thank goodness your highness came swiftly and immediately seized their vitals. Otherwise, if it kept burning, we'd all be dead." Hearing his words, Muqing closed his eyes and lowered his head. On the side, the Guoshi had already surrounded the child, observing him closely. "Guoshi, is there anything the matter with that child?" If there was anything the matter, such as being possessed by ghost, Xie Lian should have been able to recognize it immediately. After having trained at the Royal Holy Pavilion for a number of years, he'd worked on his sight especially, and very few things could deceive his eyes. Yet he couldn't see anything off with this child. The Guoshi shook his head, also seeming to have observed nothing amiss. He asked, "What's your birth date, month, year, and time?" Hong Air seemed to be guarded against everyone, tensing with hostility, and would only stare at him, not speaking. Xie Lian encouraged gently, "Just tell him. Guoshi only wants to tell your fortune for your own good." The moment he spoke, Hong Air obediently told the time of his birth in a low voice. Guoshi knitted his brows and started calculating with his fingers. The people around watched him talking in low tones and saw his expression grow dimmer and dimmer. Xie Lian watched and became more and more solemn, too. Guoshi looked to be no more than a tender 30-something young man, but Xie Lian knew better than most how powerful his teacher was, to be able to rule over the royal holy pavilion. The number one Guoshi of Xianle, Mei Nianxing, was famed throughout the land for his fortune-telling. Xie Lian learned the art of the sword and of the spells from the deputy Guoshi, but never learned the art of fortune-telling from the Guoshi himself, only because Guoshi told him it was an art of the streets. The golden stature of the crown prince had no need for such tricks. Plus, Xie Lian himself wasn't interested, so he never tried. However, whenever Guoshi worked his art, there were never mistakes. You joke, Cyan, but that's kind of what, you know... Oh no, he's a Gemini. Oh no. This is tied into ideas of, I guess, the zodiac, astrology, like the thought that your birth date and time has something to do with your fate and your destiny, and this story is going to use that in a way to tie into like his bad luck. A while later, more and more cold sweat was rolling down the forehead of the Guoshi, and he mumbled, No wonder he ruined the heavenly ceremonial procession. The spirits of the black pagodas grew excited, sensing him. The Xianle pavilion was burnt too. This truly is. Truly what? Xie Lian asked. Guoshi wiped his sweat and suddenly backed a meter away. Your Highness, you really brought something you shouldn't have up the mountain. That small child is toxic. His sign is born of the most ominous star, the star of solitude, destined to bring misfortune and destruction, the kind that evil loves the most. Whoever touches him will have misfortune befall them. Whoever gets close will lose their lives. Before he even finished, there was a loud scream, and Hong Hong Air leapt to his feet, running towards Guoshi to headbutt him. His voice was young and tender, but his screams were filled with rage, as if his heart was filled to the brim with unspeakable pain and anguish. I hate to pause in this sad moment. Oh my lord, cat! Ah, I have a bag of groceries sitting by my door that I haven't put away. It's just, you know, box of stuff that needs to go away. He's chewing on it! He's chewing on the cardboard! You dumb cat! Let's see if I can see him. Where are you? You're stupid! Stop chewing on the groceries! You're stupid! Ugh. I knew I heard him doing something bad. Oh, he actually is a Gemini? So I guess that means you know who he is. I imagine it... Gandalf! Stop that! Don't make me get up and get you. I'll have to disturb Bob, and I don't want to. Oh, man, where was my book? Where did it go? Where did it go? Here it is. His voice was young and tender, but his screams were filled with rage, as if his heart was filled to the brim with unspeakable pain and anguish, making many of those present shiver. The young child was covered in injuries, yet he tore and hit out at them like a red-eyed rabid dog, violent and aggressive. The deputy Guoshi blocked Hong Hong Air, and Guoshi backed away, yelling, Make him leave the mountain! Hurry! Don't touch him, I mean it. The fortune is too toxic. Don't touch him. The deputy Guoshi hurriedly moved aside, and Mu Qing and Feng Xin didn't know whether to act. Seeing that everyone was avoiding him like he was a poisonous snake, the child was shaken and started thrashing even harder, biting and screaming. It's so sad. It reminds me of a plotline from the Witcher books where there's this character, these characters that are born under a certain eclipse, and everybody treats them like monsters because of the eclipse, and all their lives suck, and they all end up becoming like monsters because people treated it like it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. It just makes me so sad. And clearly that's what's happening with him, you know? Actually, it gives a little explanation here of what the Star of Solitude is. People with the Star of Solitude in their fortunes are said to bring great misfortune to those around them, while they themselves are fine, which is why it's called the Star of Solitude. The sign can be nullified with the meeting of a savior. It is one of the most devastating signs in Chinese divination. Wow. Oh no. I'm not! Suddenly, a pair of arms wrapped him around the waist, encircling his small form. A voice came from above his head. "You're not. I know you're not. Don't cry now. I know you're not." The young child pressed his lips closed tightly, grabbing on to that pair of snow-white sleeves around his waist with a death grip. He forced himself to hold back for a long time, but in the end he couldn't. A stream of tears suddenly rolled down from that round black eye, and he burst out crying. Xie Lian embraced him from behind and reiterated firmly, "It's not you. It's not your fault." How do you not see treating a child like that? That poor baby. Xie Lian is such a good boy. He deserves the world. Chapter 68. To ascend is human, to fall is also human, Part 3. Hong Hong-er whipped around, stuffed his face in Xie Lian's chest, and wailed. The wailing contained no words, utterly meaningless, and was nothing like the sound of sobbing, but was nevertheless hair-raisingly dreadful. Without looking at who it was, it would sound like the desperate cries of a full-grown man breaking down, or the struggling of a small beast with its throat cut open by a knife, as if only by immediate death could he be relieved. Anyone could make such a sound, but it shouldn't be coming from a child of 10 years. Everyone was shaken. A moment later, Guoshi said, "I mean it. It's best to let go." Feng Xin finally came to and yelled, "Your Highness, let go! Be careful of—" But in the end, he didn't have the heart to continue. "It's fine," Xie Lian said. That Zhou Shishang, however, was quite concerned for his Highness's welfare and saw that Hong Hong-er was smearing blood and snot all over Xie Lian's white robes, so he ran over to pull the young child, berating, "Little kid, you can't!" Yet the harder he pulled, the harder the young child held on to Xie Lian, refusing to let go no matter what, using both his hands and feet to grip on, screaming, "Ah!" I disturbed Bob. I'm sorry, Bob. It's so bad. Every time I do a stream where I have to read, I always disturb the Bob. I am sorry. You say hi, Bob? Hello. Go back down. 3 or 4 more people came forward to try and rip him off, but instead that made him hang on to Xie Lian like a little monkey. Xie Lian found it both funny and pitiful, and held Hong Hong-er with one hand, gently rubbing up and down the emaciated back in comfort while raising the other hand. "Never mind, don't worry, let him be." Some moments later, after feeling the child in his arms stop struggling and quieted down, Xie Lian asked the people close by in a whisper, "Was anyone else hurt in the Xianle Pavilion fire?" "No," Mu Qing replied. "There was only us inside at the time." As the Xianle Pavilion was burnt to a crisp, Xie Lian could no longer stay. After making sure it was only the building that was burnt and not any of the people, those who came to help put the fires out started to help clean the vicinity, feeling rather distraught at all the charred, precious gems and treasures. Xie Lian wasn't concerned, however. The things he used daily were a little more intricate, but other than that, Xie Lian didn't really have anything of importance stored inside the Xianle Pavilion. The most precious items were his collection of over 200 treasured swords, but they were made of durable metals, unafraid of fire, since they were all forged in flames anyway, so they were all unharmed. After having dug them out himself, Xie Lian stored them temporarily at the Xishang Pavilion that belonged to the Guoshi. That's just such a understated funny line. He really didn't have too many belongings that he was worried about losing, besides his 200 swords. As for Hong Hong-er, he was still firmly holding on to Xie Lian, and after having cried himself to exhaustion, fell asleep. Xie Lian had wanted to bring him down Mount Taisong to find a safe place to settle him, but the Guoshi asked him to make a visit to Xishang Pavilion first, so Xie Lian carried the child over too. Tucking the young child into the divan, writing the covers, Xie Lian dropped the bedside curtain and backed out of the room with Feng Xin and Mu Qing in tow. "Guoshi, is that child's fate really that terrifying?" The Guoshi pursed his lips. "Why don't you think for yourself? After he appeared, what has happened?" The 3 were quiet. The moment the young child appeared, he'd fallen off the city wall before the eyes of millions, forcing the Shangyuan heavenly ceremonial procession to be cut short after having only made 3 rounds. When he appeared again, Xi Rong was dragging him through the streets in the horse carriage in rage, causing a riot, made Feng Xin break an arm, and Xie Lian butted heads with the king, making the queen cry. This time, all the resentful spirits of Mount Taisong broke out of their seals within the Black Pagoda and even burnt down the Xianla Pavilion. Misfortune was indeed following after him like a shadow. "Is there any way to break this?" Xie Lian asked. "Break this?" the Guoshi said. "What do you mean, change his fate?" Xie Lian nodded. The Guoshi said, "Your Highness, you haven't learned the art of fortune-telling from me, so when it comes to matters like these, you really don't understand anything. If you did, you wouldn't have asked." Xie Lian was taken aback and sat himself up straight. "Please, enlighten me." The Guoshi took his teapot from the table and poured a cup. "Your Highness, do you still remember the day when you just turned 6, when His Majesty and the Queen bade me to enter the palace to tell your fortune, the one question I asked you?" Watching the steaming cup of tea, Xie Lian pondered. "Do you mean the 2 people in the cup of water?" That year, the Guoshi had asked Xie Lian many questions in order to help tell his fortune. There were questions with answers and ones without, and with every answer Xie Lian gave, the Guoshi would praise the boy, making the king and queen smile with pleasure. Many exchanges from that conversation were later passed around as delightful stories, but there was one question to which, when Xie Lian answered, the Guoshi made no commentary. Few people knew the details, not even Feng Xin, never mind Mu Qing. The question was 2 people and a cup of water. The Guoshi spoke. 2 walked the desert, about to die from thirst, and there was only 1 cup of water. The one who drinks lives, the one who doesn't dies. If you were a god, who would you give that cup of water to? Don't speak yet. I'll ask the other 2 and see how they answer. The last part of his words were directed to the 2 standing not far behind. Mu Qing contemplated and responded cautiously. "May I ask who the 2 people are, what their natures are like, and their merits? A decision can only be made once all the details are known." Feng Xin, on the other hand, answered, "I don't know. Don't ask me. Tell them to decide amongst themselves." Xie Lian pfft and laughed. Guoshi admonished, "What are you laughing about? Do you remember how you answered?" Xie Lian schooled his expression and said solemnly, "Give another cup." Hearing this, between Feng Xin and Mu Qing, one turned his face away, the other lowered his head as if they couldn't bear to listen. Xie Lian turned his head back and said in all seriousness, "Why are you guys laughing? I'm serious. If I was a god, I would definitely give another cup." The Guoshi gently shook the cup of tea in his hand, and the tea swirled in the cup as if it had a life of its own. He continued, "All fortunes in the world, good or bad, are limited. Just like this cup of water, there's only so much. Once you've drunk your fill, there will be no more left for others. If one receives more, the other must receive less. Throughout the ages, all conflicts are born from the fact that there are many in this world, but only 1 cup of water. And no matter who it's given to, there'd be a good reason. You want to change fate. It's difficult, but not impossible. But if you change that child's life, someone else's life will also be changed, and more grudges shall be created. Once upon a time, you said to just give another cup of water, just like today how you wanted to choose a 3rd path. Your intention is to expand the source, a beautiful thought, but I will tell you it is impossible." Xie Lian listened silently, but disagreed wholeheartedly. Still, he didn't rebuke. "Thank you, Guoshi, for your wisdom." The Guoshi drank his tea, smacked his lips, and said, "Don't trouble yourself. Wisdom or not, you don't listen anyway." Having been seen through, Xie Lian softly cleared his throat. "Guoshi, earlier today, before the great martial hall, in a moment of passion, this disciple offended you. Please forgive me my affront." The Guoshi shook out his sleeves and smiled. "You're my proud disciple, and the Crown Prince. How can I not forgive you? Your Highness, I can tell that you are the most beloved by the heavens I've ever seen." Xie Lian didn't understand, so he listened closely. The Guoshi continued, "You have the talent, the ambition, the heart, and you're not afraid of hard work. You have a prestigious background, yet a compassionate nature. No one is more suited for the title Darling of the Heavens. Still, I am worried about you. I'm afraid there will be a trial you won't be able to pass." "And that is?" Xie Lian asked. Although you've already achieved such a high level, there are some things you are still far from understanding, and others can't teach you. Just like how today at the Great Martial Hall, that speech you made about not worshipping God or something. Very few are able to think that far, and that you were able to reach such thoughts at such a young age is already impressive. However, do not think yourself the only one who had such thoughts in the world. Xie Lian's eyes widened slightly. The Guoshi continued. The things you spoke of today were already spoken by others decades, maybe centuries ago, but their words never took form, their voices were too small, so not many heard. Have you wondered why that is? Xie Lian hummed and replied, because even if they thought of it, they never acted on it. They weren't determined enough. And you? What makes you think you're determined enough? The Guoshi asked. Guoshi, do you think I can ascend? Xie Lian asked. The Guoshi gave him a look and said, If you can't ascend, no one can. It's only a matter of time. Xie Lian smiled. Then just you watch. He pointed to the sky. If one day I ascend, I will for sure do all I said today and become a power to behold. Feng Xin and Mu Qing, who were standing behind him, having heard his declaration, both unconsciously held their heads higher. Feng Xin's lips curved upward, and the light shining in Mu Qing's eyes was exactly the same as Xie Lian's. The Guoshi nodded. Very well, I shall wait and see. However, I don't think it's a good thing for you to ascend too early. Let me ask you, what is the path? Xie Lian inclined his head. As you've said, that which is walked is the path. That's correct, the Guoshi said, but you haven't walked enough, so I think it's time for you to take a walk down the mountain. Xie Lian's face lit up. The Guoshi continued. You're 17 this year. I will permit you to descend Mount Taisong and gain some experiences through travels on the outside. That's excellent, Xie Lian exclaimed. Every day spent at the royal capital, just thinking about the king, Qi Rong, and many others, Xie Lian couldn't help but feel crabby. Plus, having such a glamorous Xianle pavilion be torched, he wouldn't be able to avoid another bout with his parents. If he could go further away, he could focus on walking his own path. Just then, the Guoshi added, Your Highness, throughout the ages, there's been a saying that's passed down like it's the ultimate truth. But it's actually wrong, only no one had ever noticed. What saying? When humans ascend, they become gods. When humans fall, they become ghosts. Xie Lian gave it a thought. Is there something wrong with that? The Guoshi replied, Of course it's wrong. Remember, when humans ascend, they are still human. When they fall, they are still human. Xie Lian, I'm sorry, that's very much the meaning of the whole book, and it just resonates really hard with some other stuff that happens. Xie Lian chewed on those words, and the Guoshi patted him on the shoulder and glanced behind. In any case, as for that child, don't let it worry you too much. Everyone has their fate. Many times there won't be a way to help just because you want to help. If anything happens, we'll deal with it then. Go out and experience the world. I pray that when you return, you will have matured. However, that very night, outside everyone's expectations, the child escaped from the Royal Holy Pavilion and disappeared. And what was even more, outside of everyone's expectations, after his trials at the age of 17, the crown prince of the kingdom of Xianle, Xie Lian, soundly defeated a nameless ghost at the Yin Yan Bridge. And just like that, he ascended to the heavens amidst the roars of thunder and lightning. It was the shock of the three realms. That's the end of chapter 68, and we'll stop there. Thank you guys for listening. We're getting some good shit, getting into some meanings. They're talking about some Taoist things like the path and, fate, and it gets into some real serious shit. We're getting into the deeper things, the kind of themes that are going to be pulled together and tied together in the later centuries of the story. This is all just set up for a lot of things that will pay off in 200 chapters. It's so well done, and it's very clearly the evolution of this author's work. Her previous two works are really fun and really great, but it's clear that the experience she got with writing those has led her to the masterpiece of being able to plan out and write something so intricate and complex and beautiful with this work. I love all her works, but this is just clearly so well written. It's amazing. And the TV show's now going to be on Netflix, so if you want to watch the animated first season of the Heaven Official Blessing, it's on Netflix as of, like, this week, I think. Thanks for watching. I'm not going to be game streaming today because I have shit to do with the house, but I'll be back tomorrow with a book and a game and blah blah, who knows. Thanks for listening, and thanks to members, everybody that's member on Patreon or on my other YouTube channel. I know Delvin and Jeff are. Thank you guys for the support. If you'd like to support the channel, check the links in the description. You can get bonus content, lots of behind the scenes extra videos, all kinds of stuff. I'm not really working on anything right now because I'm kind of ill a little bit and behind on a bunch of things, so working on catching up on work and feeling better, and hopefully we'll be back to normal soon. So yeah, tomorrow, probably a horror book if you want to join us, and game afterward. Maybe Devil May Cry. I'm kind of feeling like I want to play it now because we were talking about it yesterday. Anyway, you want to say bye, Gandy? Come here. You have to say goodbye. Hello. You say bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, friends. Bye-bye.